Welcome to the Glenhurst ArTeach video series. In this episode, local printmaker Kristine McGregor shows us how to make a monoprint from home. So Kristine, you collected a bunch of beautiful things from out in nature. What do we do now?
So it's just a variety of botanicals that I found. You want items that aren't too thick because you're laying paper on top and the paper will only take so much depth before it needs to touch the ink.
Right.
So you're looking for texture. So it's a lot about touching and not just about seeing, because what you see here isn't going to show up in a print, but what you feel. So if you kind of go through and play with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction because you might want to pick kind of the most beautiful piece, but it's more about like how much good texture does it have in it.
Yeah, so these leaves are really great because there's holes in them. So if you feel like that texture is going to show through and it'll make a really nice impression. So what are you drawn to? What would you like to start with?
I feel like your description of these leaves was the best. I just want to try with all these little holes, so maybe this one. Okay, so what is step number one?
Getting the ink out. So we have our plate and I'm just going to mix the color to use as our base color for our print. So we have a nice sort of warm black and we're going to take our brayer. Our brayer is what we use to charge our plate. So you want to do a full rotation down. You can kind of see where it starts and stops, and then you lift your brayer and you roll down again.
And you want it to be fully covered.
Yeah, so you want to make a nice even layer.
It makes quite the sound.
It's a great sound. You're listening for that sort of even sticky sound. So we're going to take our plate, and I've made templates to sort of help us with our registration. So we're going to put our plate down, and then we're going to roll the ink down on the plate. So I want to sort of leave I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I'm going to do it in a window inside that. So now we're going to apply the ink to our plate, and we want a nice, even, thick layer.
It really builds up on top of itself, doesn't it?
It does.
Beautiful. Should just go over and over it until...
Yeah, and it's important to lift and roll until you can see what's happening with a nice, even layer. You can pivot and roll.
Oh, so it doesn't matter. You can roll both ways.
Right. So I've created a window that's on a 9x12 piece of Mylar, and we're going to lay that down on our registration plate.
So now this is why you have the grid under the plate, right?
It is, and this way we get a nice, even, clean edge for a border for our print.
Beautiful.
So now we're going to lay the leaf in the middle of the plate.
Okay, so let's pick this bigger one. And where do I put it?
Yeah, you just want to sort of put it in the middle.
Straight up and down?
Yeah, it's important not to smoosh it around. It's really important that the paper doesn't move around when you're trying to make an impression and that your material is not squishing around. Because if it were to move around, it's going to leave marks on the ink that we weren't aiming to get.
For sure.
So we want to put the leaf in the middle of the plate and we want to make sure it's not moving around at all. So we're just going to take a piece of bond paper. This is just photocopy paper. And we're going to line it up with the template we have underneath. The smaller lines are the 8x10. It's important, again, that it doesn't shift around. So I line up the longest edge first and then just drop it down.
Perfect.
So you can use a variety of items to pull your impression. A sophisticated printmaker would use a printing press. I have a Glass Frog, which has a nice weight to it. It helps get a nice impression with a nice smooth bottom to it. You can use a brayer. It's harder than the ones we use for the ink, and it will just apply even pressure. And you can also use like a metal spoon or a wooden spoon.
Nice.
So the glass baron's great because it has a heavy weight, and small circular motions will get a lot of detail from your plate. You can achieve the same thing with a spoon, small circular motions and pressure. And the brayer is really good just for large sweeping motions. For this particular first run, we're just gonna use the brayer.
So how do you know when the ink has come through enough?
So depending on the paper, sometimes if you use a nice rice paper, you'll be able to see it through, but you don't have to know exactly. So as long as you're sort of holding the paper with your hand to keep it stable, you can take a peek to see sort of what's happening.
Oh, cool.
And you can lay it back down.
Okay, so this piece of paper here, though, isn't the piece of art.
This isn't going to be the best piece out of the ones that we're going to do. And you can always go back and turn it into something, but your results are going to be not as interesting as the next couple prints that we pull.
Cool.
So it's really about the ink on the plate. So doesn't it look a lot different than when we started?
Yeah, it looks totally different.
It does. So I want to remove more of the ink so that what's left behind after we peel the leaf away has a lot of contrast to the background. So I'm going to just do this again to see if we can remove a little bit more ink.
So really in the pressing process, you're just trying to take as much ink, get as much ink soaked into the paper as possible.
Yeah, you're sort of manipulating what's on your plate so that you get an interesting result. And it comes with trial and error. And the more you experience, the more you're kind of going to understand your ink.
In essence, the leaf is holding in the ink that will be on the final print.
Yeah, so we're doing two things here. We're creating a texture on the plate. When I remove the leaf, you're going to see it. We're also charging the leaf with ink. So this leaf has a really nice amount of ink on the bottom side of it. And we're going to set that aside to create a print from it afterwards. Yeah. But first we're going to see how that transfers onto paper.
Great.
So this is an 11 by 12 piece of paper. We're going to line it up with the outside.
And this is a different kind of paper.
Yeah, so it's a nicer piece of paper. So it's going to take more ink off of the plate. And it's acid free. So we're just going to get you get different results with different papers. So again, I'm holding it. It's important that you hold the paper in place to make sure that you're not jostling it around so that you get a nice crisp impression.
Right, because you kind of like squish the ink or move the ink around.
Yeah, and the aim isn't to get smudges, it's to get sort of a honest translation of the texture of the leaf that was underneath it.
So is this the final print then?
So it'll never be the final print. It's basically manipulating your ink until you get the results that you want.
Oh, okay, so it could be like another iteration after this.
Yeah, all of these layers sort of build up and create a really nice blend of ink underneath, and it could take you really far, or you could be happy right away. Did you want to do the reveal?
Oh, I would love to.
So just sort of hold the bottom and peel up the front. And if you don't think there's enough ink on there, you can lay it back down and rub it some more.
Oh, it's super beautiful.
So it's really neat to see how all the textures come through and the different parts of ink. So there was like a chunk on the plate that left a little white spot, but those are the happy miracles that just sort of happen.
And that are never going to happen again.
Right. So the results are really beautiful and you might be happy with this, but we're going to go one more step and see where it goes. For this one, we're going to take the template away. And you're going to notice that because this wasn't a porous piece of paper, it still left a lot of ink charged, which is going to leave a really neat result. And then we're going to place our charged ink back on top of the other ink. We're going to get a shadow from before, and then we'll place the paper on top and take another impression.
Great. So now you flipped the leaf over.
Yes. So we want the side with the ink facing up so that ink can transfer onto the paper.
Right.
So we're just aligning it with the edge on our template and dropping it down. And then using our brayer to transfer the ink.
And now you want the ink from all the way around.
It makes a really neat frame and adds a bit of interest.
It's amazing how I see how it's called monoprint because you can only do it once with each piece. But in essence, you're getting like 3 or 4 different prints from it.
So the difference, there's monoprint and monotype. A monoprint is using a matrix. So because we're using a leaf, that's considered a repetitive matrix. So we're taking an element that we can repeat in each print. A monotype is literally a painting on a piece of plexiglass with no matrix in between. So you want to be gentle that you're not damaging your paper. And this is why it was important that the material we chose isn't too thick.
Right.
Because if it was really thick, then it would be leaving marks and damage in the paper as we try and make the impression.
Okay, so now this is the final print. We'll pull off this.
So from my experience, I get the best results from sort of this stage in the process.
Okay. Well, there's lots of different color and texture and layers,
so
right?
give it a little peek and make sure that you think we've pressed enough.
What do you think?
I think it's good.
It's beautiful. I love the frame and border around it.
It just adds a little extra to it. And because it wasn't a porous frame, it didn't absorb the ink the same. And it even made a different sort of texture because it puddled a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still see the shadow of the last print that we made. So we talked about how if you pushed harder, you would have got a better transfer of ink. So a printing press is the best thing to use when you're trying to apply good, even pressure. So we'll do your last run on the etching press. So this is your plate that you've already worked on, and you can just place the ink side up of your leaf.
Okay. So I'm going to put this like there.
Right. And then this is the Japanese paper. So we want the shiny side down.
Shiny side
You can
down.
sort of feel
which side's smoother.
Yeah, and align it with your plate.
There we go.
This is just to protect my blankets. So it's just a scrap piece of paper.
To not get ink on everything. Great.
And then the blankets go down on top of the plate. So the blankets just protect the roller and help give an even impression. And then you're just gonna turn the wheel to run the plate through this way. You should feel a little bump when it hits it, and then we're gonna go back again.
Okay. So I don't need to, and it's not hard to move.
No, it's important just to do an even.
There's the bump.
Yeah. Just a steady, even push through. And again, it's about not shifting the paper underneath, and the etching press will do a good job.
Well, I've hit it.
Yeah, I think you're through.
Okay, so we'll go back. So you just want to keep moving, right? I feel like a pirate.
I know, it's fun.
How's that?
Good. So we just peel the blankets back.
So peel this one back.
And then the scrap piece of paper. And then the reveal at the end is the most exciting part. This is where all the printmakers gather at the press to see the results.
See what happens?
Yeah. And there's a lot of oohs and ahs. There's an energy. It's great.
Let's ooh and ah. Okay.
So already you can see it's sort of different. You can see a lot more through.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, this is so exciting.
Okay. Oh, wow. It's beautiful. It's so interesting how you can see when we did it on an angle, you can clearly see the first leaf and then see what the second one looks like.
Yeah, and you can play with design elements that way too, right? And do those things on purpose.
Yeah. And with the press, I totally see how I got more detail that I wouldn't have got with maybe the spoon.
Mm-hmm. And the outside sort of transferred differently too because of the heavier pressure.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I really like it. So when do you decide to use the press?
Well, when you want a really good, strong, even impression, and you get really good pressure. So it's necessary for intaglio prints, and for monotype, it gives you the best sort of transfer of ink onto your paper.
Beautiful.
So if you want to hang that up, I'll move the press, and we can take a look at the stuff we made.
Perfect.
So it's a really neat art form to get into, and the possibilities of where it takes you are limitless. So it's just sort of following what calls to you and having fun and playing with it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please click the subscribe button below. Give us a like or visit our channel for more videos in the Glenhurst ArTeach series. You can also stay up to date with everything Glenhurst at glenhurst.ca.